that you don't have to look through me. And I will try to stay pretty much in this place. Yeah, there's a whole section over there. I will be talking about it. Today, one of the things that I do is that I work for the Noahide World Center, Brit Olam. It's a center which caters to the needs of Bnei Noach. There are thousands of people today in the world who have declared that they want to live by the Sheva Mitzvot Bnei Noach. And there are several organizations that help them. Chabad is one, but we also are. I'm the English webmaster of the Noahide World Center. I also put the symbol of the Israel Center on the slide. I want to thank the Israel Center for the opportunity to give this talk. And I think there will be some very interesting things here. I'm going to break one rule. This is a talk in English, and the first thing I say is in Hebrew. Okay? Because this is what happened to me when I first saw this book. I want to tell the story of how I got involved in this book. Nikarim divrei emet. This is a saying in Hebrew. Things that are true, things that ring true, you recognize them when you see them. You say, wow, this is it. I see something that I haven't seen before. This is a statement that appears in the Midrash about various things. The Rashbam explains that the minister in Egypt, when he heard Yosef's interpretation of the dream, he said, Vayar ki tov patar. And the minister saw that Yosef explained the dream in a good way. And the Rashbam says, sure, Nikari divrei emet. The minister heard in his voice that this was the right thing. Okay. This is a book. I don't have to pick it up again. We'll see it again in a minute. This is a book that from the first minute I started reading it, I said, wow, this book, everybody has to read this book. And I'll try to show you in this talk why I think so and why my talk will not be enough. You have to get the real book and not just the quotes that I'm reading. Hadassah and I, my wife Hadassah and I, were, okay, you can read it. Well, I have a slide of it also. Here's the book in English, and as Rabbi Nahon said, it came out originally in French, then in Hebrew, which I'm going to talk about for a second, and now it's in English after a long haul of getting it out in English. My wife Hadassah and I got to know Rabbi Uri Sharkey, many years ago, and it turned out that he was giving regular lectures in Haifa, where we live, once a week. I started going to them. Rabbi Sharkey is a very charismatic and interesting person. One day he turned up with this book in Hebrew because he had just translated it from French into Ivrit, and he was selling it there. We all picked it up, and for about a week nobody could talk to me because I started reading this and I couldn't put it down. I went to Rav Sharkey and I said, this book must come out in English. So he sent me to Nelly, who's sitting over there. Nelly, who's sitting over there. And she said, yeah, there's an English translation, but we haven't put it out. And I said, but you have to put it out. Well, the English translation was a typewritten manuscript. Now, already 20 years ago, typewritten manuscripts were not something that you could put into give to a printer. You have to have it in Word. You have to do it in the modern way. It took us 20 years of various misstarts until we finally got an OCR reader to put it in and to correct it, and we, Nelly and Nahon found somebody very good, Natalie Koenig, to go over the translation, again, from French to English. She made quite a few corrections. I'm very excited about the book. So the book, the whole theme of today's talk is Nikarim Divrei Emet. Okay, here's the history. Here's the French, and this is available in stores in Israel and other places. This is available on Amazon, many places. The French, as Rabbi Nahon said, has been printed four times already. This is not the kind of book that becomes a bestseller the next morning. It's the kind of book that people slowly get to read and then recommend to other people, and people see it and so on. The Hebrew of Sharkey, published in '95, and now I need a trumpet. And now, this year, last month, the English was published. It's available in bookstores. I know the, what's the name of it, in Yerushalayim? The Moriah bookstore, I know, has it. Other bookstores have it. You can get it directly from Geffen Publishers. You can order it directly from Amazon. And you can buy it right here at a cheaper price. So if I convince you at all, buy it from Moshe Goldberg. Rabbi Nahum went over some of these things, but I'll get into it quickly. Abraham Livni was born in Marseille. He was in a Protestant family. He lived in a little village south of France somewhere. It's a famous village, La Chambon-sur-Lignon, and I'm sure I'm pronouncing it wrong. I hate it, she can tell us. But this village, I think they were recognized as Chasidei Omot HaOlam. This village saved some 3,000 or 5,000 Jews during the Holocaust, during the Shoah, by a very simple thing. When they knew that the Nazis were coming, they hid all the Jews in the forests all around. But they did this regularly. They saved these Jews. And Livni, I don't know if he took part in that. We'll see in a minute. He was 20 years old at the end of the war. In 1945, which is after the war, he started studying math and physics, but then he moved over to theology. He said he writes somewhere that he was having arguments all the time with the theologists, so he just moved over to study that stuff. And then he moved to philosophy, went to Casablanca, where he taught philosophy, and he converted to Judaism, which we'll see some of the quotes I bring.
In which country?
In Morocco. I think in Morocco. He converted. You can ask Nelly, she's right behind you. In 1963, Nelly and Avram moved to Yerushalayim. He taught in Bar Ilan University. As we heard, he learned from Rabbi Yitzchak Kook, and a year after the book was put out, he passed away.
What year were they married again?
What year were you married? Do you remember? 60-something?
No.
What year were you married to Avram? So,
57.
57, okay. 63 is a great year because Hadassah and I came on Aliyah also in 63, but we didn't come across the Livnis, which is a shame.
Y'all came from New York?
Huh?
Y'all came from New York?
Yeah, but that's not the subject today. I'll be happy to talk to you later. I'm going to go through a series of extracts, quotes from the book. Some comments, some not. I hope that from my talk and from the things that you see here, you will get the power of this book. This book, as I say, I couldn't put it down in a different language, but it doesn't matter. So let's go through some of the quotes and some of the ideas that he tried to get across. Very important ideas. Everybody should be reading this. I was 20 years old at the end of World War II when the horrors of the extermination camps were revealed. I had been formed spiritually during the oppressive war years. It was with an awareness of living through the most tragic period in history that I had to search for the paths of my spiritual maturity. Just after the war, here's what he wrote. He was 20 years old. It sometimes seems as though man has lost all control over himself. Not only does he seem powerless to check the quasi-fatal march of events that outstrip him, but he himself seems still possessed by demoniacal forces that dominate him, and we then witness an authentic race to the abyss of a people possessed. I'm going to try and stress at least one sentence on most of the slides here. No one knows anymore what man is. He came out of the Shoah, out of the Holocaust, not as a Jew, as a Christian, saying, how could man have come to this point? Nobody knows what humanity is. Nobody knows what human beings are. He goes on. That was a situation inherited by a young Christian of 20. I think it's amazing that at that age he was able to have these thoughts. less tragic, he says, than the situation of those who, as Jews, had suffered in their flesh the ravages of the infernal machine set into motion for the final solution. But the shame and the disgust felt by those who, being Christian, had not been pursued, by those who, being Christian, had not been pursued, were no less unbearable than the anguish of those who were the primary victims of the persecution of Jews. They, as victims, could at least believe themselves innocent. But what could be said of young Christians? He said, how could we, as Christians, as the ones who did the Shoah, find out what to do, find out where we were, what all this means? It was only after years of a passionate struggle, while pursuing my theological philosophy studies, that I succeeded at last in bringing to light in all lucidity the enormity of the myth on which Christianity is built. And we're going to continue on this theme. He, who grew up as a Christian and started studying theology, explains what the problem is with Christianity and what it has to do with the Shoah, and we're going to get to that. However, it took me several more years to discover that the Jewish people of the Bible continued to exist. I said before, I work with B'nai Noach. This is something that we hear from people today. They are taught that we'll see that their Christianity teaches that the Jews have been replaced. But people are taught that the Jews who lived in the time of Avram Avinu, not Avram Livni, no longer exist. There is no such thing as a Jew who descended from the prophets and from the people who lived in Eretz Yisrael. If there's something that is mentioned in the Bible, it has no relevancy to anybody alive today. He says, it took me several more years. I lost the. Well, yeah. I don't know. It took me several more years to discover that the Jewish people of the Bible continued to exist. He finally found out when he was in Morocco that these Jews were the same Jews as the ones he was reading about in the Bible. I now know for certain that only Jews rooted in their spiritual heritage can scrutinize in all lucidity the malady that affects modern civilization. On a later slide, we're going to get back to this word, malady, sickness of humanity. They alone, they the Jews, can analyze objectively, without hatred and without bias, the error that has corrupted Christianity from the beginning. An important point of what he's talking about is, an important point of what he's talking about is he compares another important event during the Second World War to the Shoah, Hiroshima. And he says it's completely different things. Hiroshima, where the United States dropped an atom bomb and surprised the Japanese, and I don't remember how many were killed and many more maimed and so on. You'd say it's a terrible tragedy, it's a terrible thing, it's a Shoah. He says no, it's completely different. Let's see why. If Hiroshima puts into question war, that being the physical survival of mankind, the Holocaust poses a moral problem, that of the spiritual future of a civilization which had given rise to the monstrous horror of the gas chamber. He says, qualitatively, the Shoah is different from the war that the United States ran into, whatever they did in the war. Unfortunately, the problem of the Shoah has been drowned in that of Hiroshima. Now, I'm not sure that now, 30 years after this book was written, we see this happening so much. It could be that some of what he's leading up to, or some of what he's saying, has been understood by more people than him now. But this is a point that he felt he had to make. However, the Holocaust is something else altogether. It's not only the cruelty, barbarity, and primitive and criminal madness that was capable of contorting man's moral judgment by stifling his intellect and his reasoning powers in order to change him into a killer. The Holocaust is the logical, The Holocaust is a logical, methodical, and systematically organized implementation of the final solution decreed by the official government of a whole people for the express purpose of exterminating the Jewish people. The Shoah was on purpose by a government that decided that they wanted to do that because we were Jews. Hiroshima was a terrible thing, but it was in time of war, and different kind of character, different quality.
The enemy.
Huh?
The Jews were not the enemy.
Absolutely.
They were
Yeah.
Japanese were the enemy.
We certainly understand that, but this he says these things, and I went on to the next page. The Holocaust is not the simple product of the barbarity of man. It is of a nature totally distinct from all the crimes of history, the great crimes. The problem of Hiroshima is limited to the domain of political common sense. Should I drop an atom bomb? Will it end the war? How many people would kill? How many people? Mine will be. There are considerations that are taken into account in it. Pogroms pose the problem of religious fanaticism, combined with ignorance and bloodthirsty instincts. A moral problem. However, the Holocaust puts into question the very foundations of Western civilization. He says, after the Shoah, and we'll see that it's tied to other things that go on, humanity has a problem. Where are they? What are they doing? What will they be doing? 2,000 years of Christian civilization alone had made possible such complicity or such utter silence. To speak of the silence of God in the Shoah is a false contention. People say, where was God? Why wasn't God doing something? Where was he? He says, no. The real problem, the only problem, is the silence of man, or rather the deafness of man. God cried out. This book has large sections on Nebuah, or what a Navi does, a prophecy, and we'll get to some quotes from that. God cried out, and prophetic spirits shouted themselves hoarse to warn of the imminence of the catastrophe. But man was deaf. So the problem, you can't say where was God. Man had a lot to do with the Shoah and in the Shoah and didn't do it. Man did not do his job. God was at Auschwitz, I think I skipped one. Yeah, sorry. This is a question, the title here, God was at Auschwitz. That's a question that is asked by people. Where was God at Auschwitz? And I know in the book, Eim Habanim Semecha, which Avraham Livni quotes from, he also addresses this problem. Pretty much gives the same answer. They didn't quite have the same source, but they went through the same path. History, he says, is not the product of chance. It is not chance that brought together, I hinted at this a few minutes ago, in a single instant, the extreme opposite dimensions of human existence, death and birth, despair and hope, abject Satanism and pure idealism. The creation of the State of Israel and the Holocaust, that both began well before 1943, correspond to historical dynamics diametrically opposed. One, the dynamics of decadence and destruction at the heart of Western civilization. The other, the dynamics of regeneration and reconstruction at the heart of the Jewish people. He says there are processes that have been going on for 2,000 years, that are still going on today. He wrote that 35 years ago, and it's still true now. 35 years ago, it's still true now. This is what we have to recognize. And the fact that the process of evil, which culminated in the Shoah, in the Holocaust, came about at the same time as the process which led to the return of Bnei Israel to the land of Israel, it's not coincidence. There's a meaning to the fact that they came together. Okay, we'll see a little more about it later on. In spite of this, one would have to be blind not to see that a mysterious providence brought these two events together as if to make of them two milestones, or rather the opposite sides of the same giant milestone. This is a picture that is something just to look at. the fact that these two came together shows that there was a breaking point. There's a mathematical name for it. Okay. A singular point in history. Something happened at that moment that the two came together. Okay, within 2 or 3 years, but that's coming together on a scale of 3,000 years. Okay, so he says there's one milestone that these two processes came together, and we'll see what he says about it later. Separating, I just said this, two historical periods in the development of civilization. There is before the Shoah and Kol Mamdina, and before the return to Israel, and there is after the Shoah. And these two periods are separated by a milestone that says here there was a Shoah and here there was creation of a state. Providence was present in the Holocaust, just as it watched over the creation of the state of Israel. Both of these events, God was involved. And it takes understanding to follow this and to agree with it. Jewish faith cannot claim the contrary. Nothing escapes the unity of the Creator. Providence is not powerless before the forces of evil, since it is God who created them. And he brings the pasuk, I form light and create darkness. God created both sides, the light and the darkness. I establish peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all of these things. So you can't say something got by God, he didn't know this or something. It's part of the processes that are taking place in the world. He has something to say about Christian. I said to you before that we would talk about the word malady, the sickness of civilization, of mankind. As a former Christian, I have more than others the right and duty to clearly identify this disease, the malady. It is not anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is a symptom, it's not the sickness. What is the malady? It is the theological lie on which Christianity is built. The theological myth built up around the person of Jesus transformed into Jesus Christ, and the myth of an Israel that has run its course, denying to the people of Israel the role of educator or redeemer that according to the Bible it assumes throughout history. This is what I said before. He said, many people were taught that Israel has run its course. The Jews of 2,000 years ago no longer exist. We don't have a mission that's continuing. His entire point in the book is we have a mission and it's continuing. The mythical transfer of the historical mission assumed by the Jewish people in the service of mankind to the person of a deified Jesus by transferring our mission, the Jewish mission, to Jesus, eliminates all justification for the continued existence of the Jewish people. If it's not justified that we exist, you can make a Shoah and get rid of us, because there's no reason for us to be here. Did Christianity replace Israel and continuing the same idea? The abyss separating the Christian faith from Judaism. Those who believe that the Messiah has already come from those who are still awaiting him. Okay, we have two sides. Christianity says the Messiah is here and we know that he isn't yet. Is much deeper than many would think. The Christian belief that the Messiah already came 2,000 years ago and all his so-called advent brought in its wake was wars, crusades, chaos, and hatred toward the Jews, only goes to prove that Christian messianism and Jewish messianism are diametrically opposed in their very essence. If you say that you brought the Messiah and what it brings is war, then there's something wrong. That's not what it should be. One believes itself to be the outgrowth of the other. Christianity claims the scriptures for its own, but this apparent proximity only accentuates still further the differences between them. So gross and primitive is the copy, an absolute parody of the original, that this proximity is utterly intolerable to Judaism. The Christian belief that the Messiah already came 2,000 years ago, over here, when all it is so called out, okay, they only brought war and so on, one of them, so gross and primitive is the copy, an absolute parody of the original, that this proximity is utterly intolerable to Judaism. I want to give something of an idea of what he tells us about prophecy. Prophecy, not only is prophecy real, okay, it's not a question I want to address, but there's a purpose to prophecy, a purpose that we have been told and that we have been taught and that we Jews have a mission. We're going to get to the word mission if we didn't yet. To use the prophecy, to do something in the world. Okay? So you have to understand what prophecy is. This from others, from Sharkey and others, I've heard many of these things, but Abraham Livni puts it into writing in a fantastic way. Prophecy in Israel. With the appearance of Abraham, not Livni, but Avraham Avinu, not only a new moral mission suddenly springs up in history, but also a dimension now buried and stifled in man, the prophetic dimension. Abraham is the man capable of listening to and hearing the word of God. This is not the inner voice of the conscience, but the transcendent binding voice that leaves no doubt as to its origin. It is impossible to appreciate the true dimensions of modern history, and particularly the significance of the return of the Jewish people to the land of Zion, without recognizing that this return of the dispersed expresses the same dynamic that first manifested itself when Abraham left Ur Kasdim for the promised land. We are continuing the process that Avraham Avinu started. The process is continuing through us. We are here to continue it. If we don't, we're not doing our job. We're not fulfilling our mission. Prophecy is in effect such an integral part of the Hebraic consciousness that its absence is felt as painfully as the absence of inspiration in the poet. Let's say you know a poet and, I don't know, he has a bad year. Nothing comes out. Well, that's terrible because he has inner feelings. He wants to get them across. However, I think it started working again? Yeah, a little bit. While poetic inspiration remains bound to the personal sensitivity of a poet, prophetic inspiration concerns the moral evolution of a nation and through it the evolution of the human race. Somebody who becomes a Navi, I'll get to this sentence in a few minutes, has a message for Bnei Israel, for all the Jews, and for the whole world. So it's not just a poet who has beautiful ideas that can be expressed beautifully. It escapes, for this reason, prophetic inspiration, escapes the subjectivity of an individual to achieve an objectivity of universal dimensions. It is doubtless necessary to emphasize one obvious truth. Jewish prophecy has nothing in common with divination or fortune-telling, as it is found among other peoples. The Navi is charged with transmitting a message to the people. The Navi has a job to do. He has to tell the people, this is what God wants from you, from mankind. The message is not limited to predicting the future, for it possesses all the dimensions of authentic knowledge: moral, spiritual, religious, metaphysical, and metahistorical. In truth, nothing would be more... Why do we need prophecy? Okay, going on to the whole thing. Nothing would be more absurd than a world deprived of all prophetic revelation, abandoned to the silence of its artificialism. If in the world, Nivuah, prophecy, had not come about, the world would be missing something, doesn't get it. The world just wouldn't be the world. Because God, ontologically, it's the word he uses very much, I didn't put it in here, I think. From the religious point of view, from the philosophical religious point of view, if God would have created a world without telling us what he wants to do with the world, it would be meaningless. There would be nothing to it. That's what he says. Nothing would be more absurd than a world deprived of prophetic revelation, abandoned to the silence of its artificialness. Likewise, it would be the ultimate absurdity to believe that the world could be the fortuitous product of chance, a consequence without a cause, or a creation without a creator. As if blind matter were really capable of the unimaginable feat of organizing itself independently into a harmoniously ordered world. That's an argument with the philosophers, we won't go into it. The Jewish philosophers strove to explain the rational and ontological necessity, there's the word, of the prophetic revelation of Sinai. The gift of the Torah is not only the central historical event around which all the cultural and spiritual history of mankind revolves, not of Judaism. The world would remain unfinished and the revelation of God in His creation would be meaningless if He had not revealed His will to His creatures, and that is what prophecy does. Even more, prophecy is the mission of the Jews, I say, and the mission that it is. Endowed with a wider view of the past than the other peoples, mired in the present, Israel draws from its memory a more acute awareness of the sense of the human adventure and its dynamic. He's saying here that we, the Jews, are the ones who can understand our mission from the prophecy. Read the Nevi'im, Avraham, learn the Torah that Moshe brought down to us. And we as the Jews can understand that this means the world has to be laid in a certain way. Others don't understand that. All the prophets were visionaries of the future, not prisoners of the past. It is precisely because they were capable of discerning the true dynamic of history that they were also able to pierce the iron curtains apparently blocking the vision of the societies of their time and pave the way for deliverance and the future fulfillment. When the prophets talk about the return of Bnei Israel to the land of Israel, this paves the way for the deliverance. We have something that we can look up to, something with a future to look for. This fidelity to the genuineness of past experience radically distinguishes the prophet from the revolutionary. The revolutionary aspires to overthrow existing institutions, but the future in his eyes is no more than a rootless abstract utopia. Inasmuch as he is incapable of recognizing the value of history, he throws overboard the good with the bad. And here he talks not only about communists who have utopia in their mind. We could qualify as utopia the tendency of some Jews to reduce the prophetic message to the moral and social ideal of a society founded on the principles of justice and peace. I will not give examples. He says that among the Jews, there are people that say the important thing of whoever, Hoshaya, is that he was interested in social justice. Now, he was interested in social justice, but that's not the point. He was interested in social justice as part of our entire mission. For them, the prophets, particularly the last ones, were revolutionary apostles of justice, the forebears of true socialism. But those who prefer to see no more in the prophetic message than this ideal of a totally equitable and pacific society are utopian dreamers or simply naive. That's the same one again. They could be likened to educators who teach their young students the advantages and uses of electricity, but refuse to convey to them, perhaps out of ignorance, how electricity is produced. Can these Jews be educators worthy of trust? Those who believe that the state of Israel was created to save some survivors of the death camps and provide a refuge for the victims of anti-Semitism are committing the most prosaic oversimplification. Let's skip a few words. The establishment of the state of Israel filled the vacuum that had been created in the history of civilization. There was something missing in the world because we were not living here. That's the message. The Zionist movement would be making a foolish error if it imagined that its role was limited to creating a little Switzerland in the Middle East. Means for the Jewish people to disappear from history, from the view of the world. That's not it. They have a message which goes much further and much... Israel is called upon to establish itself in the Holy Land in order to put into practice this teaching and spread its message throughout the world. Go down near the bottom. Sinai would lose its meaning completely if it were not linked with Zion. This This would be as if the seed refused to sprout and grow, a refusal of history, of its development and maturation, a shirking of responsibility, and the stifling of the word. Sinai, the giving of the Torah that we received, and the Torah itself, and studying the Torah, is not complete until, 65 years ago, when we came here, we were given the state. We started to learn how to run the state. I'm not going to go into that now. Okay, so there's a mission, and it's still going on. We have the mission, and we have to understand it, and people are looking for us to do it. Here we are, mission. Only a people who have inherited a mission so profoundly bound up with their very existence could survive the incredible difficulties of their historical destiny. Looking for... Okay. He's got two words that he talks about. Mission emphasizes the part of Jewish people connected with the free appearance of their identity and their ability to respond to a call. Mission is something that we have to do, have to accomplish. Destiny means designates the constraining framework in which this freedom of choice must be exercised. Destiny is something that happens to us. We have to understand the difference between events that take place around us and we have to react to them, and our ultimate mission, what we're really here to accomplish. The Holocaust was not part of the mission. We did not have a mission, an objective, a goal to go through a Holocaust. But the prophecies themselves warned that it could become part of its destiny. When Moshe Rabbeinu in Ha'azinu lists all of the terrible things that may happen to us, the Tochacha, the Torah. These are destiny, it may happen, it didn't have to happen. On the other hand, the creation of the state of Israel does not stem from the destiny of Israel, from its mission. We have to be here, we had to establish the state of Israel. Numerous midrashim point out the connection between constraint and mission in Israel's existence. One could say from the perspective of the Midrash that the Hitler catastrophe, Hitlerian, placed the Jewish people as well as mankind before the possibility of an end to the world and a return to nothingness. The Midrash says, if you don't accept the Torah on Sinai, the world will return to Tohu Vavohu. He says that's what happened. If we don't respond the correct way to the Shoah, there is a possibility that the world will return to Tohu Vavohu. Israel is not a superfluous luxury that human history could do without. We have a mission, and the world must learn from us and accept the mission. "35 years after the catastrophe," well, he wrote the book 35 years. It's 70 years already, 65. 2,000 years after the prophecy of Ezekiel, the Jewish people possess a past long enough and rich enough in blessings and curses to appreciate the actuality of Ezekiel's threat. "I will bring you into the wilderness of the peoples, and I will enter into judgment with you face to face." We have to be careful. Not only do we have a mission, things will happen to us if we don't follow the mission. The choice the people must make is between a tragic destiny and fulfilling their mission in keeping with the covenant. There is no other alternative. A little scary, but we have to meet the challenge. I learned, after reading the book several times, I learned that the way Livni writes is to write, and keep you fascinated, and in the end he summarizes. So I went to the last page or two of the book, and here's what he says in the entire book. I say this, yeah. This then is the ultimate goal of the return. To rise and be seen to be far beyond the petty politics and trivial issues that preoccupy the Zionist movement. He says, so what do we do with a Zionist movement that, I won't say is not religious, forget that, but that worries about socialism and whatever, 35 years ago, was not exactly the way it is now. Nonetheless, Zionism has a specific role to play in the meta-historical framework of the Great Return, whose universal dimension was clearly shown long ago by the prophets. The sages saw its first manifestation in the renewed fertility of the land over a century ago. We know the Midrashim, and he brings this here, he quotes it, that in the Gemara it says, there is no greater sign of the return, of the coming back to Eretz Yisrael, than that the fruits on the trees start growing again. And he quotes Rabbanim, who 150 years ago saw the fruits growing and said, here we are, this is it. Okay? So he says Zionism has to recognize this. Where are you? Satan saw its first manifestation in the renewed fertility. Now time is running out. See that statement? Running. The Jewish people, this was 30 years ago, and it's running out even faster. The Jewish people seem to be falling behind with the fulfillment of the grand design. It is being carried out in a period of crisis, catastrophes, and enormous upheavals. The juxtaposition of the Nazi genocide and the establishment of the State of Israel, we talked about it, that they happened at the same time, is no simple accident of history. Now that the dream of return has become a reality, the Jewish people can no longer ignore its predestined mission to rebuild in the land of the promise the morality and spirituality that mankind needs in order to survive. I think we could skip to the very end. The last sentence in the book. This book is 400 pages saying this last sentence. And don't think that from my short talk here you have seen the book. There's a lot in it that I couldn't get to and didn't get to. Been trying to show the flavor of this book to get you to buy it, either in English or in French or in Hebrew. The last sentence in the book, there's an appendix afterwards that I won't go into. The return of Israel is in truth the hope of the world, the only path to its salvation. The more people we get to understand this message, Jews and non-Jews alike, the faster we will be accomplishing what we're supposed to be accomplishing. And number two, getting to the salvation of the world. It's a word maybe, I'm not sure I like using that word, but that's what it is. I have 3 notes just to finish off. This is the beginning of Parshat Lech Lecha. God said to Avram, go for yourself from your land. Lech Lecha, go for yourself. Me'artzecha, mimolatecha, and so on. The commentators ask that this beginning, God speaking to Abraham, is different from every other case of a prophet or of somebody being called by God. Because in every other case, the Torah, the Navi, explains why this person was picked. V'Noach matzah chen b'nei Hashem. Noach found favor in God's eyes. And the next pasuk, or a few verses later, it says he's going to save Noach, ish tzaddik, tamim haya v'dorotav. Noach was a tzaddik. He was a tzaddik because he found favor in God's eyes. He did something first. Avram is mentioned as somebody who's the son of Terach, and it doesn't say anything about Avram. It doesn't say, and he was a great person, and he was somebody God liked. Nothing. It says, God said to Avram, Vayomer Hashem al Avram lech lecha. And several commentators ask, what's the point of this difference? The Sfat Emet says something that I think is very relevant to this book and to the world today. He says God is speaking all the time He was calling out to man all the time. He was calling out when Avraham was alive, and he was calling out before Avraham was alive. And only Avraham heard. So that's why you don't have to say why Avraham was picked. Avraham was not picked. Avraham is the one that came to heard the call. Okay, that's why he was there. Today, there are people that hear the call. I said in the very beginning, I work now with B'nai Noach. Jay Shapiro here speaks on the radio to many people, or not B'nai Noach, but among the Goyim. Also, they're coming along with this message that Israel, B'nai Israel, we have something to give the world. Rabbi Sharkey, who I mentioned before, gave a long shiur, a long lecture a few years ago, that the world is angry with us because the world knows that we should be giving them a message and we haven't been doing it correctly. I think that's part of the reason that he founded the Noahide World Center. So just like Avram, there are people who are waking up. I'm going to say something about the prophecies. I spoke about the fertility of the land. For 2,000 years, part of the miracle of our return, for 2,000 years, all the people who came here couldn't get anything growing. And we know this. And the Rabbanim saw 150 years ago that all of a sudden there was coming out. All of a sudden there was coming. That's part of the prophecy. There's another very interesting thing. I had Moshe Kempinski. I don't know if you people know him. He has a store in the old city in Jerusalem. And I heard him speak a while ago. He said he has a lot of contacts. His store is right near the Kotel HaMaravi, right above the Kotel HaMaravi, and he has a lot of people coming into his store. He sells Judaica, but not only Jews, but non-Jews come in. He says about the time that the Russian Aliyah started, okay, that the gates opened up in Russia, many non-Jews started coming into his store, and they still do it today, in awe about the fact that the prophecies are coming true. Okay, they're not talking about the prophecies that we're growing a lot of oranges. All of a sudden they saw that the Russian Jews who could not get here at all, they're coming. And he says this gets all of these people excited. Okay, so not only we, but a lot of people who are not within the Jewish fold right now, are being excited by the fact that the Russian Jews, but it's not. I mean, we have the entire ingathering of all the people from all over the world. So the Nevuot are true. They're coming true. They're coming true all the time. Nikarin Divrei Emet. When you have something, when it has the ring of truth, or when something rings true, I'm never sure exactly how to say it in English, you can't put the book down. And I couldn't put the book down, and I recommend to all of you, pick it up, read it, but warn your friends that for a few days you're not going to be able to talk to them. Friends, that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Moshe, is there anything in the book which brings it down from the general message to the fact that we have to run a